Well, I'm glad we could bring this green room discussion to you now. Let me introduce my guests. Andy Bannister is becoming kind of a familiar face on the national landscape, certainly on this program. He's the Canadian Director and Lead Apologist for Ravi Zacharias International Ministries. He has a PhD from London School of Theology. His doctoral thesis was on the Quran. I'll come back to that. Greg Pharaoh is a former Crossroads employee. It's been Old Home Week. Nice reunion time here today. He is now the Senior Producer Director with Talon Productions, who have helped produce a video series entitled Truth Unlocked, Keys to Connecting with Your Muslim Neighbor. Now, you gentlemen are both passionate about this project, about the subject. Andy, I think I needed to be reminded that you have had kind of a focus on Islam as a passionate Christian apologist. Tell me about that.
Well, it was really actually talking to my Muslim friends that led me into apologetics, and now I'm working with RZIM kind of internationally and globally. But it was running across Muslims back in 1997 in London and England, and beginning to have really quite kind of passionate and engaged conversations with my Muslim friends, which first led me to study apologetics, because they were asking me questions I couldn't answer. I would go back from those conversations and begin to read, and that then got me into apologetics more generally. And I used to find those conversations wonderful. I mean, Muslims are such passionate people. I would come back from those conversations, my head kind of ringing, my kind of heart pumping, but through that discovered not just apologetics and the great answers we have for what we believe, but also really discovered a love of Muslims and sharing my faith with them.
Islamic apologetics workshops. You've been doing them for years.
Oh yeah, I mean the interesting thing was when I first got into studying Islam, more back in sort of 97, 98, and you said that to people, I said to fellow Christians and to friends, oh, I'm interested in Islam. Usually the eyes glazed over and the conversation moved on, and then of course 9/11 happened. And suddenly when people discovered that Islam was a speciality, it wasn't so much, okay, can we talk about something else? It was, when can you come and talk to us? And now, whether it's here in Canada or North America or further afield, when I travel for RZIM, it's the #1 topic people ask me to speak on. It's like, yeah, we'd love to hear about atheism and all these other things, but can you do something on Islam? Which excites me, because I think there are two big challenges facing the church here in Canada and in Europe and North America, and those would be secularism, and I think we're pretty good on that. There are good resources, but also Islam. And so it really gets me excited when I see Christians wanting to take that seriously and really begin thinking about and taking seriously the challenge to reach out to our Muslim friends, neighbours, colleagues, classmates.
Do you know what the percentage of Muslim population is in Canada?
Excuse me, I don't know the percentage, but I think it's up to about sort of 1.3, 1.4 million Muslims here now in Canada, and it's rising all the time, growing quite rapidly, which is a challenge, but it's also an opportunity.
Greg, this is a surprise, seeing you here and in this context, and you've been so involved with what we're going to be looking at. How much did you know about Islam before this all began?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Not a thing. And that was kind of our motivating factor. Was I live in a small town here in southern Ontario. Grew up with a fairly monocultural experience. I still live in that same town, and I have a number of children, and I went to my youngest daughter's school one day. I was walking through the hall to her classroom, and I realized I'm almost in a minority here. And a lot of these kids are Muslims, and I know nothing about them. I haven't prepared myself, the church hasn't prepared me, and if I notice it in my town, what's it like in the rest of the country? What's it like in North America? And that's where I produce videos for a living, and we do a lot of service work. Someone will call us up, want a video. We do a lot of work for different ministries and missions and things. And what my business partner Tim and I have been looking for was something that we could do that was our own, because we have a heart for missions. I worked here for a number of years. I used to always say that if you ever saw me on Huntley Street, it was a terrible, terrible mistake had happened, because I used to do camera.
That's right.
But
and editing, didn't you?
Yeah, I was an editor here. I directed a few shows at different times, but it was, we kind of needed something to kind of hang our hat on, and you know, we prayed about it and we talked about it, and we got together one day after spending a few days in prayer, and we came back and I said, I think we should do something regarding Muslims. And Tim said, that's funny, because he'd written it down on a piece of paper. It was the exact same thing. And so we knew that God was speaking to us to do this. And that's kind of where it was born from. And our approach was that we didn't want to make any assumptions. We didn't want to start with any prior knowledge. So when we started on the project, we developed what's turned into the 6 sessions on the DVD, which were our main kind of questions that we came up with. And that's where we started. And so we go out to interview, like we talked to a number of different people. That's Tim's thing, was finding the people to talk to. And you know, we connected with Andy, we connected with a number of other people. And we would sit down with them, we'd say, we need about, you know, an hour of your time. Actually, the first guy we interviewed, we told him we needed a half hour, and we took 2.5, and we felt bad. But we would just ask questions. And so we'd get those 6 questions, and then it had follow-on questions and follow-on questions. So this series is our journey of discovery.
How has your heart, your eyes, how have they been opened as a result of all you've learned?
Pharaoh Kandani said it the best, you know, because we said to him, you know, how do you reach Muslims? And he says, you know, paraphrasing here, but he says, you can't think of Muslims as a mass. You have to think of them as people.
Isn't that always the truth?
Yeah.
Isn't that always the truth?
Absolutely. I think that's exactly the danger that we see. We see Muslims as a block, or we see atheists as a block. And actually what we need to be doing is seeing our next door neighbour, our colleague at work, the guy who serves us our coffee at Starbucks each morning. You know, whatever it is, we need to be seeing Muslims as individuals and not praying about how do we reach Muslims, but how do I reach that particular individual who God has brought into my life.
In this first short clip, we're going to be seeing former Muslims teaching us. Let's watch.
A woman is taught how to act like a Muslim woman since she is 2 and 3 years old. So for myself, I know starting to ask questions about where God is at 3, 4 years old taught me my place right away. I was told, you're a woman, you can't ask many questions and you can't approach God that way. And many of the women are taught the same way. We're taught, as women, we're taught not to be, you know, we have to cover our heads and we have to dress in a certain way. We have to not be in the presence of men. And we're taught that everything about our bodies is sinful and we have to hide it and we have to be careful with it. We're taught that we're a source of sin for a man. So these details we're taught at home and at school.
We have to be very careful as Christians not to commit a crime of gross generalization. There are Muslims and there are Muslims and there are Muslims and there are Muslims. Like there are Christians and there are Christians and there are Christians and there are Christians. And the best place to start, I believe, is to think about people as human beings created in the image of God.
Well, I learned that Islam is expressed differently in different nations. Even the interpretation of the Quran has diversity. Sunni and Shia, the two major groups. 85% of Muslims are Sunni, 10%, mainly in Iran and Iraq, are Shia. A warning not to generalize is emphasized over and over again. But fear is not an irrational response. And I know both of you would agree with that. How do you get past fear, particularly with current events, and move into an outlook that is others focused and sees the opportunity? Andy, That's what you're all about.
No, exactly. It's a great question. You're absolutely right. I think sometimes we feel badly about ourselves because our reaction to Muslims is fear. We open a newspaper, we turn on the TV, and we see some horrific story that involves a Muslim doing something wholly inappropriate, and then we push that onto everybody. But then also we respond, I think, sometimes to our secular friends that way. I know Christians who are in fear of secularism. It's creeping, and Christians are being pushed out of society.
New atheism.
Fear and fear and fear. And to go, there's nothing wrong with starting with fear. That's perfectly normal and human. But as Christians, I think we need to move beyond that